Hi, guys. It's Joshua Schmidt back here with episode 2 of our Spiritual Sunday on the Nerd Assassin podcast. If you remember, we were going through Ecclesiastes using the NIV version, NIV translation of the Bible. And in chapter 1, we looked at some of the stuff that can be meaningless in life to pursue. We talked about a work is meaningless. Everything that you gain here on earth is going to end up going away. We talked about experiences, whether that's vacations or anything in the life you live, the things you've seen isn't worth anything. We talked about notoriety, even though we may have our accomplishments be left for us, even if it's hundreds of years or thousands of years after we're gone, the earth's been around much longer and we're going to end up being forgotten. And we talked about how even wisdom is meaningless. Today we're going to go on to chapter 2 of Ecclesiastes. Most of this is going to go into different types of pleasure. And I'll start here with chapter 2, verse 1. I thought in my heart, come now, I will test you with pleasure to find out what is good. But that also proved to be meaningless. Laughter, I said, is foolish. And what does pleasure accomplish? I tried cheering myself with wine and embracing folly. My mind still guided me with wisdom. I wanted to see what was worthwhile for men to do under heaven during the few days of our lives. So he goes through a few different things here, a few different types of pleasure. He talks about laughter. Going out, having a good time, having good laughs is something that we all try to do in our life. He talks about just drinking wine and embracing folly, foolishness, and trying to see what's worthwhile. We don't spend that much time here on earth, and you have this philosophy that we just go out, laugh and have fun and drink and get silly, and that will end up having our few hours be worthwhile. And if I continue on here with verse 4, after he went through these pleasures, now in verse 4 he says, I undertook great projects. I built houses for myself and planted vineyards. I made gardens and parks and planted all kinds of fruit trees in them. I made reservoirs to water groves of flourishing trees. So here he talks about some other things that he tried to do to find meaning here on earth. And it goes into, some people feel like the best thing to do on earth is just create, just build. He talks about building, planting, creating, sort of just that creative itch, building something meaningful is what's going to be here on earth and give life meaning. But here we'll go into some more things that he ended up trying. Verse 7, I bought male and female slaves and had other slaves who were born in my house. I also owned more herds and flocks than anyone in Jerusalem before me. I amassed silver and gold for myself, and the treasure of kings and provinces. I acquired men and women, singers, and a harem as well, the delights of the heart of men. I became greater by far than anyone in Jerusalem before me. In all this, my wisdom stayed with me. So a background, this book's written by Solomon, and Solomon was a very, very rich man. He ended up building one of the great temples to God. And here he talks about just his accumulation. He ended up accumulating more things than anybody else. So this is another path that he's going with that some people go to for pleasure, is just trying to build like the biggest building, trying to acquire the most things. So we talked about different types of pleasure: laughter, wine, folly, building, creating, accumulating things. In these next verses, we'll see what the results of it was for Solomon. So verse 10, I denied myself nothing my eyes desired. I refused my heart no pleasure. My heart took delight in all my work, and this was the reward for all my labor. Yet when I surveyed all that my hands had done and what I had toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless. A chasing after the wind. Nothing was gained under the sun. So as a result of this was nothing good, nothing happy. He didn't find anything meaningful. He felt like he was chasing after the wind, something that you can't grab. Nothing was gained. This sort of philosophy of trying to grab pleasure has been around forever. One of the terms you'll hear for it is hedonism. It's a school of thought which argues that seeking pleasure and avoiding suffering equals well-being. That's how to live your best life. And it's existed for thousands of years before Jesus came down to the earth. There's a quote from the Epic of Gilgamesh, which was written, they're estimating like 1800 BC. And in this epic, Siduri says, here's a quote, "Fill your belly day and night, make merry, let days be full of joy, dance and make music day and night. These things alone are the concerns of men." So you can see like this history of just going for pleasure has been around forever. It's something that Solomon tried. It's something that almost everybody has tried at some point, is just trying to grab pleasure. So we'll continue on. Verse 12. So he tried these pleasures, and now, then I turned my thoughts to consider wisdom, and also madness and folly. What more can the king's successor do than what has already been done? I saw that wisdom is better than folly, just as light is better than darkness. The wise man has eyes in his head, while the fool walks in darkness. So here he's talking about, he might as well go for wisdom, because if you compare wisdom to folly being when you're lacking sense and just being foolish and just going about with any care, that has to be better than wisdom, right? Let's see what Solomon says. So starting from 14b, "But I came to realize that the same fate overtakes them both. Then I thought in my heart, the fate of the fool will overtake me also. What then do I gain by being wise? I said in my heart, this too is meaningless. For the wise man, like the fool, will not be long remembered. In days to come, both will be forgotten. Like the fool, the wise man too must die." So you can get this wisdom during your lives on earth, but after you die, what does it matter? Both you and the fool are both going to reach the same end by the time the earth is done. You both go to the same place, you both die and are forgotten. So verse 17 now we're on. "So I hated my life because the work that is done under the sun was grievous to me. All of it is meaningless, a chasing after the wind. I hated all things I had toiled for under the sun." So yet again, he's going into work and accumulation. Solomon's built up all this wealth, and he just hated working for it. He worked day and night, like some of us do at our jobs. Couldn't sleep while he was thinking about it. Going on, 18b, "Because I must leave them to the one who comes after me. And who knows whether he will be a wise man or a fool. Yet he will have control over all the work into which I have poured my effort and skill under the sun. This too is meaningless. So my heart began to despair over all my toilsome labor under the sun. For a man may do his work with wisdom, knowledge, and skill, and then he must leave all he owns to someone who has not worked for it. This too is meaningless and a great misfortune." So you can accumulate all this stuff. You can toil and work day and night. But all it takes is one person in your family line to spoil it all and let it all go to waste. It can be gone in a generation or two, everything that you worked for. So it's also meaningless. Even if you accumulate all this wealth and you think you changed your family tree, all it takes is one mistake and that's all gone. Verse 22, "What does a man get for all the toil and anxious striving with which he labors under the sun? All his days, his work is pain and grief. Even at night, his mind does not rest. This too is meaningless." So what real gain do you get from working all day and night? So nothing. You stay up all night, work, and you're just going to get passed on to somebody else as you die. Whether you're wise or you're a fool, whether you got pleasure out of it while you were doing it, whether you got experiences, notoriety, wisdom, it's all gone. So in the next couple verses, we're going to see our first answer to the question, what is meaningful? Verse 24, "A man can do nothing better than to eat and drink and find satisfaction in his work. This too I see is from the hand of God, for without him, who can eat or find enjoyment?" So the answer here, not surprising because we're reading the Bible, is God. If you take him out of the picture and you're just trying to accumulate stuff, you're just trying to be remembered and have your family remembered, you get nothing out of it. If you take God out of the picture, the only thing that you can think about is nihilism. This feeling of nihilistic, like life has no objective meaning, no purpose. Verse 26, to the man who pleases him, God gives wisdom, knowledge, and happiness. But to the sinner, he gives the task of gathering and storing up wealth to hand it over to the one who pleases God. This too is meaningless, a chase after the wind. So all the things we went over can have meaning if you add God to the picture. Without that, it just ends up belonging to somebody who's not God-fearing until it gets passed on. The rest of the people gather and toil and eventually hand it over and are left empty-handed. They're left feeling empty as they're moving on, like life is meaningless, this nihilistic attitude. That ends our chapter 2. I'll see you again next week. Thanks for tuning in. Our next chapter, verse 3, we're going to talk about our relationship with time. Solomon's going to talk to us about when there's a time for doing this or that. So to continue discussions, if you want to talk about this more, look for me on Twitter or LinkedIn under the pseudonym The Nerd Assassin. Until next time, have a great week. Thanks.